All righty. Peace, love, and blessings. This is Live Healthy Miami Gardens, and we're so grateful that it's Tuesday again. And on Tuesday, it is our time that we would come and be able to share health education and information from our very own Live Healthy Miami Gardens. And with that said, it is a great afternoon, and we are grateful for this time once again. This is our Live Healthy Facebook Live Health and Wellness Series. It is brought to you and by the Live Healthy Miami Gardens initiative. And it is the goal for Live Healthy Miami Gardens really to just educate its residents, those who live, work, and play live in Miami Gardens area. And I'm grateful this afternoon. I am Dr. Cheryl Coleman. I am your host today. Yay! And I'm grateful. I am the CEO of Abundant Living Health and Wellness Resulting Services. I am a healthcare educator and a provider for over 30 years in healthcare. And it brings me great joy to educate around being healthy and whole, mind, body, spirit, and soul. And I'm grateful to be a part of the Live Healthy Miami Gardens family and collaborative partner. With that said, this week we thought that we would bring to you, right, and to all those who would be under the sound of my voice, education around trauma-informed self-care. That's right. Trauma-informed self-care. And so as we do this, we're going to share with you our screen this afternoon and prayerfully bring you some information that would encourage you around making sure that you're doing the things that you can do to be healthy and whole, again, mind, body, spirit, and soul. With that said, as we think about trauma-informed self-care, that we're sharing some tips with you on today, you might oftentimes think about trauma and trauma-informed care from the perspective of somebody who's went through a really horrific and traumatic event. And absolutely, you would be right. But I want you to think about this trauma-informed care segment a little bit different, right? A little bit different. And so as we go through that, there are three things that we're going to bring to you. We're going to give you some education around what health is and how many dimensions of health that we have. In addition to that, we are also going to share with you some information around trauma, and also not just the information around trauma, but some self-care tips. And let's get ready to dive right into that right now. All right. As I shared with you, one of the first things that we wanted to look at really is the dimensions of health. Oftentimes, we think about health just from the physical perspective, but I share with you there are 10 dimensions of health when we think about health from a holistic standpoint. And so as I'm sharing this with you, I'm sharing it from the standpoint, again, from a holistic view. And so as I share these 10 dimensions of health with you, I want you to think of it as an inner dimension and an outer dimension. Inner dimension is absolutely what you're in control of versus outer, being more of those things that may be a little bit outside of your control, but yet you still, again, are able to maneuver your outcomes with that. And so with that said, the first 5 dimensions I want to share with you is the inner dimension of health. And again, first we look at the spiritual part of us, right? And so we all, regardless of our denominations or our affiliations, we are spiritual beings, right? And we all believe in something that's higher than ourselves. And so with that share, that means we have a spiritual dimension of health. And the spiritual dimension of health plays a key part in how we heal from certain events and traumas as we talk about in today's time together. There's also the physical dimension of health. That's our body, right? And most of the time we can see how healthy we are by looking at our body and by how our body moves. And so that's the physical piece. An important piece of that is also our mental, intellectual, and emotional. And those three really play together as I'm sharing with you. Mentally really is how we behave, how we show up, and how we act. Intellectually is really our capacity for us to be able to learn, right? And then emotionally is really how we feel. And our emotions are given to us as a blessing. Sometimes we don't think so, but they are a blessing. Our emotions is what guards us, grounds us, and even grows us. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that as we talk about our self-care practices as it relates to trauma. Now, those are the 5 inner dimensions which we absolutely must do our work to take care of ourselves, to be healthy and whole in a great way. But there's also some things that we must partner with, and it's not just individual, but it's collaborative, right? And so that part of our health takes up our environment, which is our housing, you know, those that we're in community with, and how we move and we grow. And yes, our environmental climate issues play a part of that. Then we have social. We were not meant to live alone. We are meant to be in community with one another. And so therefore, that's a component of our health as well. And we know that we need to be able to have occupational health, right? To have finances, to be able to maneuver and to show and to be a blessing here in the earth as we are meant to be. Everybody is born with an amazing plan and purpose for their life. And the last dimension of health that I'm sharing with you is the one that I've been blessed to serve almost the last 30 years, is the medical dimension of health. When we get out of whack in all those other places, thank God for the medical dimension of health, the science that we have that we're able to use, and all the beautiful inventions that we've given, like immunization when we just came out of the worst healthcare crisis, right, with COVID-19 and so many other things. And so when we think about health today in this trauma-informed educational segment, think about holistic health on these dimensions, all right? So with that shared, we're going to dive a little bit deeper. And as we're diving a little bit deeper, we want to talk about trauma-informed care. And as we're talking about trauma-informed care, we're doing so with the recognition that as a nation, we are all impacted by trauma, right? Directly or indirectly. And so I know when we first hear the word trauma, we're thinking about gunshot wounds, horrific accidents, wars. Those things absolutely are traumatizing, right? But think about this. Every single one of us here now has just come out of the worst healthcare crisis of our times. And guess what? Therefore, we have all experienced a traumatic situation, right? And so trauma is not just those detrimental things that we think of, but we can see, again, just coming out of a COVID-19 pandemic, that was traumatizing for everybody as we went through that. And yet, we want to share with you, even though we're out of that worst phase, the effects of COVID-19 are still lingering with us now. Not just COVID-19, but we have other infectious disease such as RSV. And now we even got rumors and cases, not just rumors, but cases of leprosy. And so again, when we think about trauma, it's not just those detrimental things, but it's the things that we're experiencing in our health, in our relationships, in our social, on those dimensions that I've shared with you. And so I want us to open ourselves up and know that we have a responsibility, yes, to have some resilient self-care practices to help us as it relates to our personal traumas and our collective traumas, because we've had collective traumas with devastations of losing our loved ones, again, in the midst of the pandemic, and so many other traumas. And so as I'm sharing, I don't take it for granted that everybody knows what trauma really is, right? Well, we're going to break it down very simple for you. A trauma, right, is something that happens to an individual when they feel really threatened by something that has seriously happened to them, whether it's something physical that's come against their body, whether it's a mental anguish, right, or an experience that they've had, if it's an emotional, right, all of these things are common in our society as we think about where we are in this place and in this time. And so researchers have found that trauma, and it's important for us to understand this and have an awareness and to build the resilience that we need, because trauma really can change the brain and the body's physical makeup, right? And that when it occurs, can lead us down the path of other disease processes such as obesity, heart disease, diabetes, asthma, and yes, mental health disorders. And so again, we are so grateful for Miami Gardens, our Live Healthy Miami Gardens initiative, and today's information around self-care and the resilience as it relates to traumas. Now, I do want to share with you, not everyone who experiences a trauma will have long-term effects of it, right? Because some of us have these resilient skills already built in and we're able to maneuver. But there are times where we have multiple events that happen, right? And collective events that happen. And that can cause some challenges with being able to heal and grow through the traumatic experiences. And so as we're sharing today, we thought it was really, really important that we would highlight some of those things that show up in our health so that we're able to cope with various issues that will come along, after traumatic experiences, right? And so I've kind of shared some of those things with you. And so there are a couple of the dimensions that we're really highlighting today as we talk about self-care, building these resilient practices that would help us as it relates to trauma. And so whenever there's a traumatic event, certain things are going to happen in us and through us and even around us. And so with that said, from a physical standpoint, whenever someone goes through a traumatic event, right, there are some things that shows up in the physical body. It could be headaches. It could be in a way that you're sleeping too much, sleeping too little, eating too much or eating too little, stomach aches. We can have anxiety, like racing heart rates, right? We can be jumpy and edgy, easily startled over issues and circumstances, and simply overly tired or exhausted, right? Remember, we said a traumatic situation can cause a change in the brain and the body's makeup. And so we're going to see some physical manifestations, right? And so again, we are sharing and highlighting and bringing awareness around this. Not only are there physical changes that occur, but there's also mental and emotional. Remember, I told you those things are married together as it relates to our inner dimensions of health. And so with that shared, some of the things that might happen is an overwhelming fear, right? You've just gone through something that's been really traumatic. And so again, fear can come upon you. When a person is fearful, they feel helpless, they feel hopeless. Depending on the situation and the circumstance of that trauma, there can be guilt and shock, irritability. Again, panic disorders may show up. Then that just general disbelief. And then there's something where I have down here intrusive thoughts, but it also can be ruminating thoughts. That's replaying that trauma over and over and over in your mind, which really is going to affect you emotionally, right? You can have trouble with your sleeping, nightmares, mood swings. Really, we must deal with traumatic situations in our life, because when we don't, these things begin to get compound, physical, mental, and emotional. And when we're really, really out of balance, then our social and behavioral health dimensions will also be affected. And so you'll see things like isolation, where people begin to isolate themselves. And again, remember, we weren't meant to be alone. We're meant to be together in family and community. Also, there's avoidance of things that might remind you of the event, right? And you be maybe even in a space where you have lack of interest in the things that you once enjoyed. And so traumatic events, any type of trauma that's experienced, must be dealt with. And so again, we're grateful for today's segment that helps us to highlight some of these things. Now, I didn't come to just make you feel overwhelmed and like, oh my God. I came to share with you recovery and restoration is possible with any disease process and even with traumas, traumatic situations. Again, as a nation and as a world, we've just experienced so many traumatizing things, but we can make it through. The journey is sometimes painful and it is hard sometimes to do the inner work that we need, but it is possible. And so that's why today we're encouraging everyone that we want to develop resilient self-care practices that help us to minimize the long-term effects of trauma. Now, you might say, Dr. Cece, that's what they call me. Yes, I'm Dr. Cheryl Coleman, but you can call me Dr. Cece. What are some of those things that lay the foundation to develop these self-care and resilient practices that help us to bounce back from traumatic situations? Well, I'm glad you're asking. I'm sharing some of this with you on my screen, where you're able to talk about it, right? Talking is a form of release, and it helps us. Remember, I said emotions, they guard us, right? They let us know when something is not necessarily right. They can ground us when things are going together, and they can guard us when we're on the right path. And so talking about it, helping us to release it, honoring your feelings is foundational in moving towards healing of traumatic events and situations in our lives. Limiting our television and radio and social media, yes, we must do, because those sometimes can trigger those situations with those ruminating thoughts that I talked to you about that prevent or block healing. We want to make sure that we're staying engaged with family and friends. It's so important. We were never meant to be alone, right? We're meant to be in community. And so we want to stay engaged. Then we also want to know ourselves. Knowing ourselves meaning know your limits, right? Know what you're capable of and know what you have the capacity for. And as you do this, this helps you with your own self-care practices, because we have the responsibility to take care of these beautiful bodies that God has given each and every one of us. We also want to get involved. Sometimes our healing begins when we're also getting involved in helping others. And so these are some fundamental things that we can do. But beyond that, we want to lift up that it is okay to also seek professional help, because traumas are really, really hard things. Remember, it can cause a rewiring of the brain and also rewiring of your body chemistry. And so sometimes you cannot do it alone. You cannot do it with just family and friends. We thank God that we do have that medical dimension of health where we're able to seek professional help. You might say, Dr. Cece, I already know some of this, and it might be repetitive, and it may not be for some of you, but we want to really uplift this, because so many people who have been traumatized experience what we call re-traumatization, right? When we don't deal with those first traumatic events that we have, and then we start encountering others and other things that we would consider the word triggers, right? Things that make us remember those things, where we're ruminating on those thoughts. And again, sometimes this awareness is not just for individuals and community, but even our healthcare providers, because as healthcare providers, we must be informed just as much as individuals in the community around how we deal with those who have experienced trauma. And remember, I said to you, all of us have just experienced traumatic events, even if it's nothing but to uplift the COVID-19 pandemic that we came through. That was trauma in itself. And so re-traumatization is something that causes individuals to have long-term effects, and it's harder for them to cope with it. And so again, we're lifting up the priority of you and I, yes, taking our responsibility to create our own self-care plans that we can share with family members and friends, right? Because they are helping to be our accountability partners in this journey. That's right, Sister Sherry, we see you. It is so true. And so today, as we're uplifting this, we want to highlight how can you develop your own self-care plan? Again, as a nurse practitioner, one who has critical care and emergency room background, when I cared for patients, and even when I taught nursing, right, we taught about individualized care plans that we would have for our patients, that we might take our medical science, right, and couple that with the person's, right, own individual makeup, thought, and buy-in, and we would make a care plan. Well, guess what? You can make your own self-care plan. And again, it is important for us to have that, because I shared with you, we've all just been through some traumatic situations. And so with that said, self-care, what is it? It's really just us as individuals, as community, as a health, the healthcare environment, really with being able to help us with health promotion. That's the way we want to promote health, right? Because when we promote health, then we prevent disease process. right? And we maintain the health that we should have to carry out our beautiful purpose and destiny. Now, self-care, this is the goal of self-care, but we're not always able to do it by ourselves. We have family, community, and healthcare providers that would help us. Self-care, when we think about that, what is it and what does that look like? Well, I'm going to share with you a few things. Self-care can include asking for help. And I share today, if you've been through any traumatic situation, again, I uplifted some of them, and there are many others that I didn't call out. Know that it is okay to ask for help. Again, we all have beautiful gifts, talents, and passions, and things that we can do to help each other through our journey. We can also spend time alone. That means also being able to feel what we feel, honoring our feelings, right? But not in the sense where we're staying alone and isolating, but spending the alone time to know ourselves and to honor ourselves in that particular way. Again, as we're sharing our screen and those slides, we talked about asking for help. And we're just getting our slides to come back on now. All right. Not only asking for help, as we are pulling back up our slides here, and we're so sorry for the technical difficulty. We wanted to not only share with you, but we also wanted to make sure that we were able to pull out and show you on the screen. Not only asking for help, it's okay to put yourself first. For those of us in our faith care communities, we always believe in, regardless of your background, we believe in caring for others, but we also have to prioritize ourselves, right? And so not only do we ask for help, we spend time alone, we also put ourselves first, right? And again, asking for the help, taking the breaks that we need, and then being able to partner with others. Now, as I'm sharing with you a little bit about these techniques, there are some components that we also remember, those 4 components of health that I shared with you. There are 10 dimensions, but as we think about self-care and as we think about trauma, we want to think about it from the perspective where we are including these particular areas: our spiritual, our mental, and our emotional, and our physical health. Now, who needs to hear this? I want to share with you anybody who cares for other people, right? Not just anybody who cares for other people, right? Those people who are parents, we're getting ready to go back to children, go back to school, right? So if you're a parent, if you're an educator, if you're a change agent, if you're a CEO, if you're a therapist, right? If you're just an individual, right? You need to know about these self-care components, especially those who are constantly giving of themselves, because it can be stressful doing so. You want to prevent the burnout. Compassion fatigue is a whole nother educational training that we share just to make sure that we're there. And so as we think about the self-component cares, I share with you the 4 key dimensions: our spirit, our mind, our body, and our emotion, right? And we laid out here how they are all affecting us. And so as we thinking about making this self-care plan, and I'm challenging and charging you today to make your self-care plan, number 1, starting with your spiritual, right? Your spiritual health, that is you connecting to the very essence and the purpose and the meaning in which you are here, right? And so a lot of people, when they're making their spiritual care plans, they may do things like yoga, right? Practicing gratitude. That's a space where I am in every day, making it intentional, right? Being thankful for the moments that I get, being thankful for all of the great things and not focusing on all of the negative, right? And so practicing gratitude is a beautiful way to help feed your spirit, man. Not only is it prayer, practicing gratitude, there's reading of scriptures, right? They're reading things that enrich you, and then practicing what we call mindfulness, and just being present in the moment. We live in the hustle and the bustle of everyday life, right? Constantly, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? Sometimes we got to slow that thing down and just honor right where we are as we're making our spiritual care plans. And so I'm just sharing with you some of the things that has been helpful in my life and some of the things that research shares with us, but you have to know you. What fills and feeds your spirit. Because for me, and I am in a faith-based way of practicing things, right? There are scriptures that I read that talks about the spirit of a man can bear any infirmity. That means whatever sickness that there is spiritually, when you're grounded and you're well there, then you're able to maneuver through trauma, diabetes, hypertension, whatever that thing is. And so you've got to make your spiritual care plan. And so I want you to write down what it is spiritually that helps you to be healthy in this dimension. Then we have our psychological, the mind, right? And our mind helps us to learn, think, and grow. We focused a lot on mental health, and we need to continue to do that. Thank God for the strides that we've made, right? And the stigmas that we're breaking down. But our mental health really needs to be a part of our regular exams, right? That check-in, maybe every 6 months, like you do with your physician, or once a year, right? With that therapist, to just really check in and to see where you are. And so you want to give attention to what you're thinking about, right? And how you're thinking about it. So personal reflection time is really, really good. Notice your inner experiences, your thoughts, and your feelings. I told you foundationally, just being able to honor what you feel, right? And not necessarily suppress them because they don't feel good. Because when you suppress them, and then there's more traumas and other things that add, and before you know it, there's an explosion. And we move from, a mental illness to possibly a mental disease. And so we want to make sure that we think about those things that cultivate our awareness. We're going to talk about some things like journaling, right? And meditation. And those things that will help you with your thought process and your thought life. And so we're sharing for you to write your spiritual plan, your psychological, which is your mind plan, and then your physical body, right? To live, to move, right? And how we show up in the world, to have the energy. And so we want to include exercise, intentional exercise, getting plenty of that, right? We want to consider some basic things that you might not have even thought about. Decluttering your house or your office. You don't know how better you feel when you have a spacious and a clean, remember, environment is another part of our dimensions of holistic health. And so when we think about the physical, it's not just the body, right? It's also those other elements that I talked to you about, right? Take time away from your computers and your TVs and your smartphones. These phones have taken over our lives, right? And our gaming. And so you want to make sure you balance that thing out and learn to just enjoy nature, just enjoy rest, just enjoy things that will replenish you in a healthy way, right? And so you want to make your spiritual, your mental, and also your physical practices, what you currently do, list that out, right? Because we're going to talk about what things you can add to that to make it a more enriching self-care practice plan. The next thing is our emotions, right? That's our heart, right? And so we want to love, we want to care, we want to be in relationship with others, right? In a healthy way. And so we've got to learn as we move through this and honor our feelings. We want to engage in the boundaries that we need to, that help us to maintain our energy and our time. We want to address the problems that we may have so that they don't build up and we cause ourselves to have long-term issues. We want to give and receive love and kindness and support. And we want to spend time with the people that we care about, right? And who care about you. We got to balance that thing. Oftentimes we're spending time with people that care about us, but are we cultivating the time with people who actually care about you? And so that's a part of your self-care plan. And so as you're making this plan, I got some steps here that I'm going to leave you with. Step 1, you need to identify your current self-care practices. Take time, 30 minutes, to sit down and write down, what do I currently do to take care of myself, right? And we're not talking about self-care practices that aren't healthy. Like some people engage in alcohol, drugs, and different things to numb the pain of traumatic experiences, right? And so even you can write those down. And if you write them down and you see that they're not going to serve you in a positive way, then we want to get rid of those and think about some others that we can add, right? And so as you think about your current practices, you want to identify what your needs are. Think about, spend time to yourself. What do I need now? Do I need more spiritual care? Do I need more physical care? Do I need more mental care, social, emotional, right? Do I need more environmental care? What do I need? And as you do that and you make this list of what you already do and what you already need, then you want to consider some other things that may enrich the plan, right? And as you make the plan, you want to share it with somebody that you love that's going to be your accountability partner. These are some of the things that we can add if you don't already have them in your plan. Journaling is powerful. Writing it down, right? You want to do that. Planting a small garden. I have been keeping a plant that I've been blessed with now 2 years, and I'm excited because I didn't think I had a green thumb, and that plant is still here. So planting, gardening, right? Learning a new hobby. Dancing. I love to dance. What do you love to do? Handcrafting, cooking, baking, right? I saw Sherry come up again, and I thank you for joining us, Sherry. You told me about baking your blueberries, right? And so we are thankful for you coming in on today. You might want to travel, right? Start a blog. Meet a friend for some coffee. I love Starbucks. These are simple things that you can do, and you might not realize that they are self-care practicing. Meet the same friend every month. Cultivating relationships, right? Write a letter to a friend, play a game, movie night, volunteer, right? Make a gratitude list. I have a gratitude list, and it is powerful to pull you off of negative thoughts from traumatizing situations and just everyday stresses. Practice yoga, join a support group, get a massage or a manicure or a pedicure. But most of all, make sure that you have mindfulness practices. So as a man or a woman think it, so is he. And so these are some of the things that you can do to build a resilient self-care practice. It is always my prayer. This is Dr. Cece. I want to tell you that your self-care, it matters. Allow it to be fun. Allow it to be guilt-free, enjoyable, and nourishing. You know what's best for you. So you've got to give yourself permission to take time to fill up your own cup so that you can make a difference from a place and a good place, a healthy place. Your self-care, it matters, right? And so we want to leave you with that. And we're grateful. This has been this week's Live Healthy Miami Garden segment, where we have looked at traumatic self-care practices. So I sign off and say peace, love, and blessings until we meet again. That's this week's segment.